So we've been studying the process of expertise and innovation for several decades and have been very interested in the difference between novices and experts, how they operate with ideas, how they work with knowledge and become more knowledgeable. So we have been especially fascinated by the course that novices take when they become experts. So some stay as novices. Some experts cease to grow. They just, you have a kind of static perspective on their knowledge. But the trajectory of those who really continually grow with ideas and actually use them in powerful ways has fascinated us. So we've been studying that for years. And really, knowledge building is the pedagogical model theory that we've developed to really create an image of schools as knowledge-creating enterprises. What would they look like if they operated like a knowledge-creating enterprise? And for that, for us, the model is how do people operate in Nobel laureate labs? How do people operate in knowledge-creating organizations of any sort? So there's a really fascinating literature, and what we've been trying to do is take our understanding from that process and see to what extent could this live in schools. So that's really been the perspective at which we come at this and the work we're doing in schools. So the one thing that fascinates us is that in these organizations, ideas are like gold. People identify ideas, grow ideas, you think something, I think something different. We really try to move forward. But they tend not to say, oh, well, we'll use your idea or your idea. They say, oh, there's got to be a better way. So there's this kind of design mode. We've reframed it, or we've given a label to it as design mode, which is this kind of, not this or this, but finding a better way. And this kind of sense that you can do that. Knowledge can be created. Young students can create knowledge. But for that, they've got to take these ideas that come rather naturally and easily to them, and then they've got to go through a course of sustained creative work with ideas. So that for us has been the harder part. Their natural curiosity comes much more easily, but the sustained creative work with ideas. And again, we've kind of turned to, so how do knowledge-creating organizations do that kind of work? Well, it actually, our conversation when we started talking made me think of it, the way you work with one another and you have these different projects and you evolve it into another one. And then here's a really hard social problem and you say, oh, okay, I think we'll tackle that. And this kind of, both the discourse, but the way a new norm is created for driving ideas forward. And that's the kind of normative piece that we've been trying to get in classrooms. A big part of that is learning to take ideas and get them out in the public so other people can grow those ideas. So this notion that if knowledge is just in your head, other people can't build on it. It can't evolve into something new. So needing to get ideas out in the open. And for that, we've developed a environment for the students to use where they can have their ideas out in a public space and other people can build on those ideas. The other thing that we've kind of marveled at in this process is that the students find this really different, and we've been trying to figure out what is so different. And we've come to the idea that the biggest difference is that for us, ideas are at the center. And the students' ideas, a lot of what the teachers do is work really hard to figure out, well, what do you really think? What's your theory about that? How does that work? Oh, you have a different theory. So the teachers are working with ideas constantly, whereas schools typically formed around tasks that are frequently designed by somebody else, and the student's ideas, they bring some ideas to them, but really doing the work and the task is what school is about. And here it's kind of like, no, actually advancing your ideas is what what school is about. And the central piece that we are trying to convey to the students is collective responsibility for advancing the idea. So not just your idea, but these are our ideas. One of the things that we find really helpful about a technological environment where the ideas actually live and they have supports for that is their views of how they're thinking about photosynthesis, how they're thinking about gravity. I used to think this, and then I discovered this, and this is now where we're moving. We're working a lot to try to figure out how to take the advanced discourse moves that really typify the knowledge-creating organization and set up the environment that gives them much, much more experience with that level of discourse. So, for instance, we design simple little scaffolds. So most people would say, well, kids don't really develop theories. In fact, they're very abstract, working with ideas, and that's more high school level. But we find if we just build a little scaffold and there's a note that they can enter into the technology environment, and they can just touch a little button and it says my theory, and the words my theory jump into their note, then they tend to say my theory is and start talking about it. And I need to understand is another part of the scaffold. So we're trying to get them, instead of waiting for the teacher to tell them what they need to understand, they can start thinking out what they need to understand, or a better explanation is. So we try to get them, so we try to take the aspects of discourse that are largely absent in typical classrooms: theory building, better explanations, actually analyzing your own thought and figuring out what the gaps in your knowledge are, and see if we can make those commonplace. So to date, actually, it's been interesting to us that indeed has been the easy part. So we thought that was going to be the hard part, but kids like to put out their theories. They say what they don't understand, which is, this actually, I have to say, has been a true delight for us, because there's this huge misconceptions literature that tries to discover what kids don't understand. And we say, if we ask them what they don't understand, they go, oh, I don't understand that. But for that, a really different culture in the classroom needs to be created. And that's the thing that's really impressed us. Like, you've got to learn that to improve ideas is exciting, it's discovery, it's good, taking risks with ideas and saying what your theory is. And I think once they get used to this, like one of my favorite quotes that I think captures this is a little child leaving grade 1's going on to grade 2, and then knows that they're not going to have this technology support and they're going to be taught in a different way. She said, so where are my ideas going to go? And who's going to help me with them? And I thought that was just lovely. It was kind of like, once you're hooked on other people helping you with your ideas, it's kind of going back to doing a bunch of tasks is just a different and more forbidding world for them. So we've come to see it as a kind of cultural norm, like working intensely with ideas and advancing ideas. It's your work in science is really, really interesting to us, because we, of course, have wanted to know, so how far can they go with these scientific ideas? Because most people's fear is if kids say what their theories are, then there will get to be a pooling of ignorance. Like if you say an idea that's not well formed and you say an idea that's not well formed, those poorly formed ideas are going to spread. And so we'll become more ignorant, not more knowledgeable. But if they know that idea improvement is what we're about, and I say, oh, but I think something different, and I had this other idea, and I found some material that suggests that that's not the way it is, that once this norm, that once collective responsibility for our ideas and growing ideas, we have no evidence of it settling low. And so our current effort has been the ongoing sustained creative work is still really hard. We get students to use these more powerful discourse moves, but where we're really headed now is trying to work with what we call meta discourse. So can they see not just what they said, but the discourse as a whole? So if you look at their spaces, their knowledge spaces that they've built and the advances of their knowledge, we can study, how is each child's idea advancing? We can look at the growth of vocabulary. We can look at the growth of we call these epistemic markers, the my theory, the I need to understand. Are they growing? Are they distributed throughout the whole community? Is the knowledge that was in the beginning different from what we find in the end? So by all of those ratings, we do find that the students can do this. But the most recent piece is, can they look at their view as a whole? And so we've been developing the tools, the analytic tools that take those first level inputs and trying to get them to look at a bigger level. So for instance, we will do a simple bar graph of here are our theories, here's what we need to understand, but now they're looking at the collective resources of the community and they're talking about it. So we've only done this at grade 2, so I don't know if it could be done earlier, but it was really interesting to us. The students saw a profile of their knowledge space, and it had, everybody has a theory. Lots of people have a lot of things they need to understand. Nobody has any evidence for anything, and nobody has a better theory. And so what's interesting is the kids look at this bar graph, and it didn't take much explaining of the teacher of this is, you're saying my theory, I need to understand, and this is showing us. And in grade 2, it's kind of, we have no evidence for our theories. So why don't you take this idea and you try to find some evidence? They recreated themselves around this. So we've been interested in this, if they can get a larger perspective on the knowledge advances, how far could they go? But just to back up, the core thing for us is to try to think, how do knowledge creating organizations operate? What's the discourse that drives ideas forward? And how could we recreate that in classrooms? So that's our primary challenge.